Hello everybody, in this tutorial we are going to see various techniques of sound design using Adobe Audition. We are going to see a range of different audio effects and categories that can be implemented into our project to ensure that a better sound result is created. So this is the project that we have made since last time, and in the previous session we saw how we are able to import various audio files, cut up the files, put them in different places, and play with the automation of volume and panning mainly. We saw destructive and non-destructive editing, such as this audio file here, where we are able to reverse the content, and we created this very interesting sound effect. The result was an audio file as the background, the rainy texture that moves from left to right, an additional sound file for the subway, and a couple of other sound effects that we implemented, mechanical sounds using a printer. So we will go and see some of the audio effects. To include an audio effect to one of our tracks, we can select the track first of all, and we can either go to the window and effects rack. So when we click this, a new panel will appear. In this case, I have this panel right here. So you will see this panel where you're able to include various audio effects for your track 1. Here we can see that when we click, we have various options: amplitude and compression, delay and echo, filter and EQ, modulation, noise reduction, restoration, reverb, special, stereo imagery, and time and pitch. Here we see that we can, of course, add more effects if we want. There is a possibility of adding more than one effect to each particular channel, and for each channel my recommendation would be not to add more than 4 or 5 effects if this is super necessary. Usually a couple of effects for each track would be fine. We don't want to have many different effects on one sound. We can have like different channels that have various variations of one particular sample if we want. This makes it a bit more easy to control and manipulate the sounds. So here, let's add one effect to our first track. I could go one by one, and we can see how we can apply each one of these effects, or let's say the most important ones. For the amplitude and compression, I am not going to focus that much in this tutorial. We're going to see more about compression on our mastering session, which I would say it's much more important than at this stage. Here we want to just experiment with various signal processors that they will give us an interesting variation of the sound result. We can play with different techniques and change the nature of the sound of each audio clip. Here we have the audio and delay and echo. The echo can be a nice effect with some sounds, such as transient sounds like the ones we have here, the mechanical sounds. I don't think that the delay would be very nice for this particular sound layer, which is very repetitive and a little bit, noisy. It has various white noise aspects into it. I will continue to show you about filter and EQ. I think this might be interesting to experiment. The FFT filter is a filter that will allow us to have various points and control through these points the intensity, the volume level of each one of the frequency range. Here we see from let's say 20 Hertz up to 20 kilohertz, all the frequency spectrum. And from that we can of course add additional points, and these points will allow us to have for this particular, let's say, range from 100 a volume that it's like minus 16 decibels. We can add various of these points, and we can control the way that they will be shaping the audio result that we have on the background, which is this rainy texture. So let's play a little bit and hear the different variations that this effect creates. You see that if I manipulate the upper frequencies, the result changes dramatically. But you also notice that now, as I want to change the frequency and experiment with the sound color and tone of my track 1, track 2 or 3 and so on, they might come into the mix, and we want to avoid this. So in this case, we would use the solo function, which would give us the possibility to listen only that particular track and not listen to the rest of them. Here in the presets, we can also select settings that they can give us an interesting preset to our track. So this is what this effect would do, and if I come and see the additional effects, we will also see the graphic equalizer that will give us 20 bands of frequencies, and it will start from 31 Hertz and going upwards to 22 kilohertz. Here we can also have additional presets. We can try bright and punchy. Here, of course, the preset will give us a more boost on the low end and also an additional boost on the high end, and the mid is a little bit lower, a couple of decibels. Let's try some other settings. And finally, I will select the parametric equalizer. In the parametric equalizer, we have the bands, as before in our FFT filter, but we can also have the Q, which is the width of these dips that they are created. So for these dips, we are able to control how narrow they are or how wide they are. We don't want to overdo it with the changes that we provide in the equalizers. We also have additional presets here. I think from all of these, the one that I really liked was the graphic equalizer and the preset on the Living Up Dead samples. The next band is the modulation, and here we have chorus and flanger and phaser. These are timing effects, so they create various timing differences. We have the noise reduction and restoration. I will not use any from this category. The reverb, special, stereo imagery, and time and pitch. I will come and use the stereo expander. So I want to give to this sound some stereo dimension to make it more rich in terms of the panorama it creates. And if I want to be experimenting same time with all of these effects that I add, and I want to see how they change my sound continuously, then I may be able to use a looping function to that particular place. To use a looping function, I have to come and go grab this the time selection tool, shortcut T, and if I click that, I can come here and just select the area that I want this time selection, and if I press play and making sure that the loop playback it is selected, I'm able to have a loop only at this point. All right, so I will play back here and I will keep experimenting with my effects until I find the most suitable. And one other thing that I will change, I will go to the pan and make sure that here I'll bring things to close to 0, because I need to ensure that I can listen my sound very well for left and right. Okay, let's do this for now. Here I'm going to select the wide field, and the settings for the stereo expander are to send things either left or right, so it enhances the understanding of the stereo field. If I play back and move this bar from 0 to 200, you will see that the sound it expands on the stereo field. Here it feels that the content is more central. And here starts becoming more dimensional, and we can see differences between the left and right channels, which is what we want to achieve at this point. So I will leave these two effects into my channel. I'll go back to bring the volume to where it was, more or less. I will try to play with the settings here and make sure that it is more or less up to 14 decibels and create this effect here. Okay, this is the subway clip. That we reversed here, and I will select the track and I'll come and see what may I add at this point to make it a bit more nice, more fun, more imaginative. I will come and select a modulation effect for this track. Let's start with chorus. Again, I will come and select my time. Okay, the time that I want this to loop from one point to the other. Okay. I will come and create the loop between the loudest points. It will be easy for me to distinguish between the content, to understand more about what happens here. So let's just zoom between here and there. The chorus effect gives the impression that there are multiple variations of the same signal, and these variations, they come into different timings. These differences on the delays between these voices that they are generated and the rate between each one of the voice and their differences in the delay time, it gives this effect that it simulates the way that sounds propagate into closed media. Now, we also have the feedback, which is going to give an additional variation of the time delay. So this is affected by taking the same delay line and then feeding it back to the same system will generate additional delays, and the spread that is going to move the content from left to right, and the modulation depth and rate, they're going to make sure that the sound is modulated through timing variations. This enhances a little bit the flangering effect a little bit more. For here we have the stereo field, how wide we want the sound and these delay lines to come out, and the output level that it's going to give us the dry signal 100% is the same signal as it goes in. And if the wet signal is 0, then there is no additional effect added to our signal. If the effect is 100, then and the dry is 0, then we will have only the wet signal, the effect, and between them we can create like different variations. So let's play a little bit with this. One thing I want to point out is that when we add the original sound, the dry sound, with the wet sound, the two signals, they are added together, and this means that the volume of the overall track, it multiplies. Okay, so here we'll see from these indications on our left side that the input level and the output level, they are different. We always need to pay attention, and if there is some sort of an issue here, we can adjust the input and output signals to make sure that we don't peak our volume. Additional modulation properties, we have the flanger, which is the acoustic result is quite intense. We can hear the result. And it becomes too electric in many cases. But of course, like we can balance between the dry and the wet signal, okay? And finally, we also have the phaser. That can give like this extraterrestrial alien sound or a lasery effect that we hear very often. Now for this channel, I'm going to select a flanger with some custom settings. I set my final delay time to 20 milliseconds, maximum stereo phasing, a feedback of 12%, and a very low modulation rate. And the result will be like this. we can hear that the modulation rate is not very fast and it changes slowly as the sound passes by. I thought that this might be more appropriate to this particular sound because it is quite long and we want it to have more time to ensure that the effect will modulate properly across its body. I am going to I'm going to get rid of the time selection, pressing G to remove that. I will proceed to my third one, and this is the mechanical type. I have these printer object. I will bring my time selection again, and I will select, I'll give it a bit more space in the beginning and at the end. Okay. This third track is this. All right, I have my printer, a mechanical sound, and I have played a little bit with the volume and the panning. I may, if I choose to bring the panning to somewhere around 0, so that I can listen to it a little bit more. For this track, I may want to add some additional reverberation, and this reverberation, it's going to give me it's going to place the sound into a space. All right, now my sound is very dry, it doesn't have any space, we can't understand the environment the sound exists in. In this case, I will try to add some reverb, and I will try the convolution reverb. And I will go through the options and see what differences these make to this current sound. I think one of the ones that was more interesting was this one. So at the end we can see the tail that it leaves to our original sound. It reverberates a little bit more and gives us this additional high frequency boost. That makes it a bit more sparkly. Here we can check the mix between dry and wet. What is the room size? And if we add additional space, we will feel additional reverberation. Low frequency damping and high frequency, that they will filter the frequency spectra, and some pre-delay, the width and the gain of my final reverberation. And the next reverb that we have on the list, which is the normal reverb, they are a bit more heavy in terms of the computation that they need to calculate the result. So I would recommend either use the convolution reverb or the studio reverb. In this project, it will be totally fine if you use either of these two. The studio reverb includes some additional options for us, which is the decay time, that is how much time it would need the reverberation to totally decay out, and damping and diffusion percentages. Let's hear it. So I'm using a bit large room with a decay of 6 seconds. I added a 20% area reflections, a width of 85%. My high frequency cut is at 4 kilohertz and the low frequency at 300 hertz. The damping of the frequencies, that is the absorption from the environment, is at 60%, and the diffusion, that is the surfaces of the environment that they diffuse and they reflect frequencies, usually these adds more on the high end spectrum, on the high frequency end spectrum, it is at 70%. My dry is at 60 and wet at 40%. So this is the result. So it adds an additional tail. It's not very aggressive, but it is subtle, but it will help blend my sound with the rest of the additional elements that I have. In addition to this, I will also add here a stereo expander, and I will go to a wider field. Let's hear that. So after I finish with track 3, that includes the sounds, because I have additional 2 sounds in a different channel, what I could do is I could come and just copy this effect to my other channel as well. I can go in the mixer, and here on my mixer I can always drag this effect here and this effect here. Now if I open it, I will see the same settings that I have included in track number 3. Yeah? So it makes it very, very fast to move and manipulate the effects that I add on my project. So let's hear the result and see if we are satisfied with that. All right, it sounds good. One thing I would like to change is the volume. Here it's a little bit higher than the normal value that I have. I may actually want to check what is the volume on this track. It is at 10 decibels, and I can make sure that this is a little bit lower and comes up to 10 here, and this is also at 10 decibels, which is quite fine. You may notice that at this point we have the sounds playing back, and the reverb is suddenly cut from one channel to the other. This is a problem because when we are setting the panning of that particular track, the reverberation also is going to be panned. And there are ways to avoid this. Now at this point, I think I don't like it very much the way it sounds. So I want the sound to be panning, but the reverberation to sound normally. So I may be able to come and get the sound from track 3 and track 4 and route them to a new channel that I'm going to create. So I will come here to my multi-track and I will say tracks and add stereo bass track. This is going to create a new track into my system that it's called Bus A, and this Bus A is going to include the audio from tracks 3 and tracks 4, but it's going to have its own independent settings about where it's going to position the content. So I come here, and instead of sending the content of track 3 to the master, I'm going to send it to bus A, and I will do the same with this one. So these now they go to bus A, and I may be able to see the result here. This doesn't affect at all the configuration I have. We can still listen to the content. The master track has the content from bus A, which means all the routing is correct. But one thing I will do is I'm going to get the studio reverberation and I will put it onto my bus channel, and I don't need to use these two anymore. So now I'm going to have the reverberation on bus A, but I'm not going to have this distracting effect that the reverberation also pans when I pan each one of the tracks individually. So let's hear it. Okay, much better, much nicer. We can still feel the stereophonic positions and the panning positions of each one of these clips, but it doesn't affect the reflection of the echoing of the reverberation. It doesn't affect the reverberation at all. The reverberation is going to be generated from bus A, and you'll see here that there are no absolute set, and you will see here that there are no settings about the panning or the volume. The track is going to be playing everything as normally. All right, this is my panning. All right, and this is how I would like it to sound. For my last track, I'm going to add 2 additional clips that they include some hum noises. Let's hear them. Okay, let's hear them. Whoops, I need to solo it. And I will take the first one, place it around here, somewhere in the beginning. Here is fine. I'm going to close it a little bit. Let's see how this blends with the rest. So it's like a short introductory noisy bit. I'm going to copy it again here, the full extent of that. Not the full, it's too long. Maybe this is fine. Let's see if the distance of them is good. And here I'm going to add a delay. So I come to track 5 and I will come to select time and pitch. No, I will come and select from delay and echo. We have analog delay, delay and echo. The analog delay, again, we can come and go through the settings here, different preferences. I'm going to solo my track and I'm going to come and do this. Here we have the dry and wet signals as before. we have the delay, how much it's going to be delayed, each echo that they're generated by the line. The feedback is going to give us back how many of these they are going to be multiplied. If we give up to 100%, then we will get a lot of noise because the multiplication of everything will become more and more and more, and we will end up with so much distortion and it will clip out everything, and we want to avoid this. And trash and spread, they create this dimensionality into our sound. So here are the settings that I created. Let's hear it. Let's play back both of them together. We may hear the sound repeating again and again because the feedback value is at a very high level. If we go to 50, the repetition will be much better. It fades out easier. It fades out faster. And this is something that I would like to play with, the variation of the feedback and perhaps the time of the delays. This I can do if I come to my channel settings and I go and open the automation. I am able to see in the envelopes not only the settings that I had previously, volume, panning, and EQ, but I can also have my analog delay. So each device, we can, in addition, automate the settings here. So if I want to change the feedback time, I may come and create different keyframes, and according to how I want this feedback to sound like, perhaps I want to create some variation, right? I don't want to go above 90%, maybe it's too much. So I'm going to keep it like this. Let's try it. So you see that this timing, the feedback is shorter, and this one, it's much more spread out in terms of the duration, the tail it leaves, and the repetition it has been caused by the feedback process. And I would play back the whole composition that I currently have and see how all of the elements they blend together. I will start from this point. So we have introduced a number of techniques in this tutorial, and you are free to experiment more. From the final summary of this project would be that we want to ensure that the decisions that we make, they enhance the particular sound effect that we want to have into our project, not making it too muddy and too noisy, but keep some balance. And all of together the sound mix, it has to come together nicely. We should be going after seeing things that they work together, and this is what we want to achieve, a composition that has a balance both on the noisy and more smooth parts between dry signal, wet signal, or if we consider stereophony between left and right, how we handle all these elements together. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and we will continue in the next one with mastering techniques, making sure that we have more body, more volume. We adjust more these relationships between our channels better, do some additional equalization, and ensure that our file is ready for the final mix down, and we can export the whole composition together or each channel individually according to our needs.